Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I think we have half of our attendees so far, so we could probably begin and everybody else will start trickling in. I'd like to kick off today's session. My name is Keegan Patrick. I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of Rifbid. We're a AI-powered e-procurement platform helping persons find government contracts and win them across the Caribbean and the US. Today, we're also joined by Doug Fraser, who's the head of procurement at the CDB, and he'll be giving us some insights into how to construct our bids and how to win more government contracts within the Caribbean region, especially those that are funded by the CDB. I welcome Doug Fraser, and can you give us a quick introduction and we could get into the proceedings for today?
Thanks, Keegan, and afternoon, everybody. For some of you, it might still be morning, or some of you evening, but great to be here. I'm very grateful for Rifbid for the invite today. As has been said, I'm the head of procurement at the Caribbean Development Bank and responsible for the procurement framework under which projects are executed that we finance. I'm going to say a little bit more later this morning about the types of project we do, how the procurement actually works in practice. But we work across 19 countries in the Caribbean, and I think we have an interesting and fairly diverse portfolio in the types of projects we work with. And the private sector is obviously critical to the success of our projects. Without the private sector, we don't get the goods, works, and consulting services that our clients need to execute the projects and in turn to deliver the developmental outcomes that they're seeking. So it's absolutely crucial for us to engage and hear feedback from the private sector. Keegan.
Well, thanks, Doug, for that quick introduction. I also want to let everybody know we'll be running a quick in the chat to find out a little bit more about where everybody's at in the government contracting journey. A little bit about how they have found the process so far. So if you like some quick responses, that'll be greatly appreciated to see how can we help best. I know Doug will put together a short presentation to take us through, and then we'll go into some questions. We'll be picking his brain on how does he think we can position ourselves to win more government contracts and foster that private sector, public sector relationship as we move forward. So Doug, I give you the reins to open up the presentation.
Thanks, Keegan. I'm hoping I'm sharp enough. I was telling Keegan and colleagues earlier, I got in from Belize very early this morning, so I'm not feeling my freshest, but I'm sure we'll be fine for today. I'm going to share some slides, and I think these will be available afterwards through the Rifbid team. Just put this into presentation mode. Keegan, can you see that?
Yeah, I can. Thanks.
All right. So I have, as I said, I have a few slides I'm going to share with you just to give you a little bit of context and background. And I'm very happy afterwards to answer some questions on any of the issues touched on or other matters. So some of you will know us very well. For others, perhaps you don't really know us at all, or you've just heard about us in passing. So the Caribbean Development Bank, we're a multilateral development bank. If you want to put it into context, we work very much the same way the World Bank or the Inter-American Development Bank would work, but our geographical footprint is just the Caribbean. In terms of the projects that we execute, they're in the 19 borrowing member countries, as we call them, and quite a few people on the call this morning have called out countries on this list. So you can see, well, actually, probably you can't see because they're very small flags, but 19 countries across the Caribbean. But we also have member countries that are from outside the Caribbean, but have an interest in supporting development within the region. And you can see at the bottom of the slide, we have 9 borrowing member countries who actively support the bank in its operations, financially and otherwise. Brazil, Canada, China, Colombia, Germany, Italy, Mexico, the UK, and Venezuela. And we're actively engaged with talks with a few others to join the bank, we hope, in the near future. The bank has been around for just over 50 years now. It has two primary objectives hardwired into our charter: to support the economic growth and development of our member countries, borrowing member countries, and to promote regional economic cooperation and integration. And obviously, this is very tied in with the CARICOM project. And within the Northeastern Caribbean, supporting some of the work of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. We are coming to the end of a 4-year strategic plan. It was a little bit thrown out by the COVID. So this was somewhat revised in 2022. And look out for a new strategic plan, which we're hoping will be approved very shortly. Apart from formal procurement processes, I would also say it's very useful to be aware of what our strategies are with individual countries. We agree with our counterparts in each country, each of those 19 member countries, borrowing member countries, an engagement strategy which covers 3 to 5 years. It speaks to how the bank's objectives will align with the country's objectives and what kind of projects or interventions we're looking to finance. We also have sector strategies, which will set out how we look to operate within the sectors that we work. And both the country engagement strategies and the sector strategies you'll find on our website. The bank's current strategic plan is anchored in resilience in all its different forms. And you can see on the slide here, we're working to support social, environmental, production, financial, and institutional resilience. And I'm expecting this to still be a core of the new strategic plan going forward. We have a number of what we call cross-cutting themes that we like to see mainstreamed into our projects. Innovation, which includes digitization. Regional cooperation and integration, which I have already mentioned is actually part of our charter. Gender equality, good governance, are all critical cross-cutting themes. Just, I thought it might be useful to flag a few sort of current developments, things that are happening to be aware of. Although we work exclusively in the Caribbean, we do work with financing partners from further afield. And this is particularly at the moment in the context of climate financing. So we're an intermediary institution to channel financing to the region for the Green Climate Fund, the Adaptation Fund, and we work very closely with some of the other multilateral development banks as well. So Inter-American Development Bank, for example, under its charter can provide financing to the countries in the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, but only through CDB. So we work very closely together to support projects and programs in the OECS with IDB, and we also work closely with the World Bank. The other entity that we're doing a lot with at the moment is the European Investment Bank, who provide lines of credit for climate financing for us to then on-lend. I've already mentioned that we're working on a new strategic plan, and we are also working to replenish our special development fund. This is our concessional financing window, which provides grants and very low-cost loans. At the moment, that's 0.75% interest to the countries that are lower down the development spectrum. And we classify our countries into groups. The CDB portfolio at the end of last year was approximately 2 billion. We're expecting quite a healthy set of new projects coming into the portfolio this year. And traditionally, December sees the bulk of the approvals, and we do have quite a pipeline at the moment. Where do we work sectorally? The bank has always worked in the economic infrastructure space. This is transportation interventions, including sort of roads, bridges, ports, airports, And increasingly, we're looking to do more in the digital connectivity space. This is really something that we want to highlight in the new strategic plan as an area of focus. Water and sanitation is another traditional area for us. We have pretty healthy pipeline. It includes things such as dam infrastructure, wastewater treatment, water lines, and dealing with the challenge of non-revenue water. Energy, I think we're expecting to be the fastest growing sector. We work here both in energy efficiency, but also increasingly, you won't be surprised, I'm sure, to hear renewable energy. And one of the areas we're very involved in right now in the Northeastern Caribbean is geothermal energy. It could be a bit of a game changer for some of the countries. We have long also worked in the social sector, particularly in terms of education. We work right through the education system and have a particular niche in terms of technical vocational education training. And we've seen a big increase in support to the agriculture sector as well. We've got some big irrigation projects ongoing in Jamaica and Haiti right now. And we have a new Haiti irrigation project we're hoping to approve later this year. The environment is key for us, building in environmental resilience into our clients' operations and helping them both in terms of project preparation and the regional and national frameworks within which they operate. Just to say that we had a new private sector policy strategy approved a couple of years ago. We don't have a separate private sector window like you will find in World Bank or IDB. And we're looking really to focus on supporting micro, small and medium-sized enterprises in the region. That's in terms of concessional financing through national development banks and financial institutions. That's including legal regulatory reform, capacity building, but also limited direct financing. And this is really where there's a market failure or there's a particular need for us to intervene. And that's probably most likely to be in the renewable energy space. We have limited time to go through all of the information on what we've been doing and where the contracts have been going, but we do have an annual procurement report. It's on our website. The first one came out in 2022 and the second one was last year. And I think you'll find this is quite interesting for those of you looking to engage on our projects and more generally in the countries in question, because it details what types of contracts we're entering into, who's winning them, where the contracts are going sectorally, country-wise, and in terms of the types of procurement. Next year, we would like to make the raw data available as well for interested parties to exploit. So look out for that next year. I thought it might also be useful to say something about our project cycle, because not all of you perhaps have direct experience of working with multilateral development banks. 4 key stages: project development. Projects here are aligned with the strategic plan that I spoke to earlier, the country engagement strategy, and they're demand driven. So it's the countries who come to us with their needs, and we ensure obviously those are consistent with the strategic objectives that we have signed off by our board. If a country formally asks for support, we enter into what we call the appraisal process. This is where we have a multidisciplinary CDB team, not just covering the technical, but all of the angles, including the legal, the social, the environmental, and of course the procurement. Team will go in country, work with the client to help structure the project so it's as strong as it can possibly be. As a result of that, what we call appraisal report is developed and sent forward to our board for approval. Subject to the board approving, we enter into a financing agreement with the country. And of course, we're looking to bring the maximum amount of concessional financing that we can. to the country in question. That financing agreement will include a draft procurement plan, although that is subject to change during implementation. Once the conditions precedent to our first disbursement are met under that agreement, we can then start releasing the financing. The country, the executing agency in that country is responsible for the project and for undertaking the procurement and in turn managing the contracts. And we only play a supervision role. And we hope there's a full cycle so that we can incorporate the lessons learned from these types of projects into future interventions. And we have an independent office, an office of independent evaluation to help with that process. So what about the procurement opportunities? The vast majority of these come under what we call project procurement. These are the grants and loans that we provide to the countries and clients that we support. And there is a limited amount of procurement that's undertaken by the bank directly. This is things such as sector studies, research, studies to inform planned programs and studies, and some internal corporate procurement for our own internal needs. Just to speak quickly to the stakeholders, I mean, I've mentioned earlier, the country is responsible for the projects and the execution, and they sit right in the middle here of this diagram as the project owner. The private sector, where most of you will sit, will be providing the goods, works, and services, and the contractual relationship will be between you and the country in question or the agency in question. As I said, we play a supervisory role. We do ensure that the procurement conforms with our procurement framework, which I'll come to in a minute. And we deal with the disbursement of funds to the client. And we are sort of the last port of call for complaints, but I'll come back to that a little bit later. The procurement framework, good news is we're harmonized with the other development banks. So if you have experience working with us or with the other banks, we should be pretty similar in the way we work and the procedures that apply. We have a policy for those high-level core principles, the applicability of our framework, the eligibility requirements, integrity requirements, that's approved by our board. Current version goes back a couple of years, you'll see to 2019. And then the details of the operations sit in our procedures. That's approved by our management. You can find both these documents on our website, but as I said, they're very much harmonized with the other banks, and we meet at least once a month with the other banks, not just in the region, but all the banks, leading banks globally, to make sure that we're pretty much aligned and nobody is stepping far out from the others. The one area where we are different is eligibility. So our eligibility is driven by whether entities come or individuals come from member countries of CDB. So our membership obviously is different to, for example, the Inter-American Development Bank. So they would have a different country eligibility list. You saw the countries earlier that are members. So if it's our own resources, all things being equal, the eligibility for the bidders, the companies in question, will be limited to the member countries. There's some technicalities about what that actually means in practice. So the firms have to be headquartered, based in a member country, majority owned as far as can be reasonably determined by member country interests. And individual consultants need to be citizens or permanent residents of our member countries. We have no restrictions on the origin and source of goods. We used to. It was completely unworkable in practice. And there's no procurement eligibility restrictions at all on our private sector operations, although, as I said earlier, that is relatively limited these days. We do have some restrictions on state-owned enterprises. They have to be legally and financially autonomous. Sometimes there's concerns for the private sector about the integrity of the process and how that's managed. Integrity is one of our core procurement principles. We have an independent office of integrity, compliance, and accountability that deals with any concerns that may be raised by any of the stakeholders in the process. And there's multiple channels you can reach them which are all listed on our website. We have what we call prohibited practices. You'll see them listed at the top of the screen. These are all consistent with the other multilateral developing banks. And firms that are sanctioned by the UN, suspended or debarred by us, publicly debarred by another multilateral development bank that is a party to a cross-debarment agreement which covers 5 banks, or engaged in one of those prohibited practices, can be excluded from the procurement process. I already mentioned that the CDB plays a supervision role. We don't do the procurement. We don't enter into the contracts. We have 2 types of supervision: high risk, high value contracts. Essentially, the procurement pauses at key stages and the documents come to us for review. So that would be draft bidding documents, for example, evaluation reports, draft contracts. Post review is for those lower risk routine procurements where we allow the agency who's executing to proceed, and we have the right to review a sample of the contracts later on against the same criteria as prior review. And you can see on this screen some of the indicative prior review stages. The ones in red are where we would undertake additional integrity due diligence. I'm not going to go into the detail, but just to give you some timelines for sort of larger goods and works processes. These are international processes. You can see the procurement process does take time. There has to be a procurement plan, a general procurement notice published with the full information on the whole project, and then a specific procurement notice published for that individual opportunity. And for these international processes, there's at least 6 weeks typically for bidding. Evaluation typically would take at least 2 months, perhaps a little bit less. And then negotiations and award a contract another month. So you can see for these bigger international processes, it does take time. For smaller, more routine processes, of course, it's quicker. I know there are consultants in the virtual room. We follow a traditional approach, MDB traditional approach, whereby the clients will seek expressions of interests. These have to be typically in the public domain advertised in the public domain for at least 14 days. Typically, it's much longer. And then a shortlisted set of consultants who have the necessary experience and expertise are asked to prepare technical and financial proposals. And typically, that's at least a 1-month period. And then the technical evaluation is undertaken, and the firms that are eligible to move forward will go forward to the financial evaluation, and there'll be a separate public opening for each. Individuals, and I understand we have some individuals on the call. Individuals, it's the same process seeking expressions of interest, but it's a much simpler, streamlined process. We don't have the proposal in there. The consultant with the best expression of interest, which is essentially a cover letter and a tailored CV, is invited to negotiate against the scope of works in question and to submit a costing. Procurement opportunities. I've already mentioned when a new project is approved, the client will publish a procurement plan and what we call a general procurement notice. These publish all of the opportunities to be procured under the project in question, some timelines, some details of the selection methods. If it's an international process or a regional process, it will be advertised on the CDB website, and it will be advertised on the UN Development Business website, although UN Development Business will be ceasing operations sometime in Q1 next year. National advertising is also required in a suitable newspaper or electronic portal or official gazette. And we fully encourage the maximum use of other platforms. And this is why Rifbid is particularly interesting and appropriate for today's conversation. We also require contract award notices to be published. And these can be interesting sources of information for who your competitors or potential collaborators may be. We publish those on the CDB website, where we are undertaking a prior review for that process. But there are other requirements, so that the contracts all have to be advertised in country in a suitable medium, and currently internationally or regionally on UN development business, but obviously that will cease in the near future. We have a weekly newsletter for details of opportunities that you can sign up to. I'm coming to the end. A few points, though, on what are your rights as the private sector if you're not getting the information you want, you have concerns or complaints, or you want to understand why you were not successful. So in the first instance, any questions or queries should be directed to the executing agency, the recipient of our financing, because they own the process. If you're not getting a response, you're not happy with the response, you can escalate it to the bank. And if it's an integrity related matter, we have obviously those channels that I mentioned earlier, independent channels, which are monitored and managed by our independent Office of Integrity, Compliance and Accountability. We have a complaints mechanism which is hardwired into our procedures as to how you should complain, what information should be contained within the complaint. And again, in the first instance, this goes to the recipient. And if you're not comfortable with the response, it can be escalated to us. Debriefings, if you're not successful, you're entitled after the process is concluded to a debriefing. So you can take on board the feedback from the procuring entity to produce better quality bids and proposals in the future. And that's me. Keegan, back to you.
Thanks. I think we got a wealth of information, especially about the Caribbean development process and how you work with the recipients, and then also what does the procurement process look like. I think that also gives us some perspective of why sometimes the procurement process might be a little bit lengthy, and also what are those mediums for complaints, and how do we make sure we're holding the recipients of the CDB funds accountable if we're not hearing anything back from them. I wanted to go into some questions that I had for you to see, kind of pick your brain a little bit. And I think everybody wants to know a bit, some advice, or what are the top qualities or elements you're seeing in successful bids, or what are successful winners in the past doing to make themselves stand out as firms, whether as individual consultants or as firms winning CDB funded projects.
Sure. I'm happy to say a few words on that. I think there is, and I should say, I've been on the other side, so I have a past life working as a consultant. So I have a good understanding of what it's like to prepare bids and proposals for MDB finance projects. And I know these types of things do involve a lot of energy and let's face it, a lot of cost. So there is a need to be selective and decide where you have a good competitive advantage. So I would say take advantage of the information that's out there, the resources, to see who the competition is, the collaborators are. And I mentioned our contracts award page on our website, but equally you'll find the same information on the other key financing agencies working in the region. So I think that's good to try and get that research and focus in early, and then to start positioning yourselves with the procuring entities and potential partners before any procurement process commences, because it takes time to build a name for yourself and to cement collaborative partnerships as well. So I mentioned a few resources that are available to give you a heads up before the formal procurement process starts. Key amongst those would be the country engagement strategies. They sometimes call out specific projects, even if there's not a whole load of information yet on what will be involved. The governments themselves, of course, have quite a lot of information in terms of their strategies, plans, budgets as to where they're looking to invest. Once the project is approved, at the front end, those procurement plans and general procurement notices are very useful. They give you contact details for the executing agency, so you can actually start engaging with them so people know you're in the market, you're interested. I would say familiarize yourself with the bidding procedures, the documents. I know these are sometimes quite weighty documents, but as I said, the intention is to be far more harmonized between the financing agencies so that if you know our system, equally you know the others with a few sort of tweaks here and there. And actually, at the moment, we're moving down the road of seeing more mutual alliance where we'll co-finance together anyway. In terms of the actual bidding process, do take advantage of requests for clarification during the bidding stage. Quite often we get complaints much later in the process that the entity in question is not happy or satisfied with the terms of reference, the technical requirements, the contractual conditions, but they didn't raise any concerns during the request for clarification stage. Or if it's a works contract, more typically there'll be a pre-bid meeting, and again, there's opportunities to raise concerns, ask questions, and these can be quite valuable. When you're preparing your bids, if you need more time, do ask early. You won't always get the extension, but it's worth asking. At the end of the day, we're often telling our clients it's better to allow more time up front to receive high quality bids and proposals rather than to force the timeline and suffer from the quality that's received, or perhaps people even not being in a position to participate. Those who are in the larger processes, the international processes, it's good to understand the standstill period as well, which allows you an opportunity after the procuring entity has detailed who they intend to award a contract to seek more information, and if you're not comfortable with the outcome, to actually raise a complaint at that stage before the contract is awarded. I think those are a few suggestions, Keegan.
Okay, all of those sounds really great. I guess the next thing on my mind is sometimes some of the contracts where they ask for bid securities or deposits upfront. Do you think it's also a strategy to start working with maybe your financing partners, maybe one of your banks as like a consultant or a small business before the process? Or what do you think because sometimes this is a barrier to new entrants or smaller businesses in not being able to put up these bid securities, and maybe a very high quality small business isn't able to take part in this process. Is this typical of CDB funding, like you need to see that bid security as part of your risk mitigation process, or have you seen this quite frequently as well in government contracting space?
Yeah, so just to say a couple of things on this. One, bid securities should not be used for consulting services, and that is not part of our procurement framework. We don't think it fits with the this modality of procurement. It leads to too many disputes. There's too much subjectivity. The use of bid securities for goods, works, non-consulting services, particularly for the larger, higher risk contracts, may be appropriate, but we equally take on board that there's a financial cost to the bidders for this. And quite frankly, the amount of times that I've actually seen a bid security called does call into question as to how much value it actually adds. So it's the client's decision at the end of the day. But we often recommend they consider using a bid securing declaration rather than a bid security. And all that does is it binds the bidder to their offer. And if they don't honor their offer, they will be prohibited from participating with procurement processes with that client for a period of time, usually 1 or 2 years. But if you are likely to be involved in processes where bid securities are required, I think it is good to work with a financial institution. I know many contractors particularly find bid bonds are a better proposition because they don't tie up so much of your cash flow, but it does take a bit of exploring.
Okay, thanks for this. I guess some of my last questions before I open it up to everybody else that might have questions is, how do you see technology playing a part in the future of procurement in the Caribbean, and how can suppliers leverage digital tools to gain an edge in the procurement process? Well,
I think you're actually part of that solution at Rifbid. These types of solutions, I think, are the future. And I mean, for us, transparency is core. So we fully support any digital modality to disseminate the opportunities. But more generally, we're seeing e-procurement come to the region. It's come certainly later than some of the other regions. And actually, in some respects, I think that's a good thing, because some of the early adopters in other countries paid a very high cost for what are now legacy systems, and they're, to be honest, often quite clunky. There's now all kinds of software as a service solutions, which are a pretty good price. And so St. Lucia now has e-procurement, Barbados has e-procurement, Bahamas has e-procurement, the Caymans has e-procurement, even parts of Haiti have e-procurement. And we're going to see more of it, and I think it will help you as the bidders. It gives a level of transparency and confidentiality to the process, so it should reassure you on some of perhaps integrity concerns. It should make things quicker. You don't have to worry about couriering, posting, driving down to the offices of the procuring entity to drop it off, and it makes things a lot quicker and more automated for the procuring entity. We're actually seeing some bespoke digital tools as well, aside from the wider e-procurement solutions. We're seeing things like reverse e-auctions, where there's for standardized goods and requirements, we're seeing a competitive real-time auction with the prices being driven progressively lower. These are the kinds of interesting tools which we're going to see more of. At the moment, I think only Antigua and Barbuda and the Cayman Islands, to my knowledge, have been using those to any great extent. But all kinds of opportunities in the future. I mean, the other thing is that for a lot of requirements, you have to send the government the same information every time: your qualification, your certificates of incorporation, maybe good standing with the tax authorities, all of these kinds of documents. In the future with e-procurement, if it's uploaded and you're registered, it should take a lot of the administrative overheads out of the process.
Cool, thanks. Really love all that insight, Doug. I guess at this time, I want to open up the floor for questions from the audience, see what's on everybody's mind after. Could you first put up your hand, and then we'll unmute you, and then you could ask your question. Lucius, Doc, sorry. Lucius.
Hi. Hello, good afternoon. My name is Lucius Doxery. I'm the CEO and Managing Director of Stratagem Paradigms Inc. We are a boutique consultancy firm located in St. Lucia, and we work in the space of energy efficiency and social development. I want to thank Keegan and Rifbid for putting together such an informative session, and I also want to thank Mr. Fraser for his time and for everybody who's contributing to the conversation. So thank you, everyone. I think for me, some of the issues that I face, because we bid a lot on projects, and we are a young company with highly talented individuals, a group of consultants in more than one area. And the challenges that I face in terms of barriers to entry is that my firm is a young firm, but we have years of experience in terms of the team of people that I have on board with me. And most times we are quite qualified in terms of the team, but because the firm itself is young and the marking on the tenders, the way they are weighted, it disadvantages us. We face that challenge. So I'm hoping that that's something that the CDB and other donors can take into consideration, because we really have highly qualified individuals on board, but because of that metric, it's quite difficult for us to break the ice and perform. So I just wanted to put that in, and I just want to say thank you again for this session. Quite informative, and thank you so much, Mr. Fraser, for the advice that you gave earlier. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucius.
No problem.
Keegan,
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Yeah.
Do you want me to respond or to wait for a few questions?
Yeah, we could do one by one.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a very good point made by Lucius there. There is this sort of friction between assuring the procuring entity that they're dealing with an established operation that, as an entity, has an experience of delivering projects, and ensuring that you encourage the involvement of fresh new blood into the market, particularly where there is a industry where the technology is moving very fast. And I would agree that traditionally there has been a premium, perhaps too much of a premium, put on previous experience, which makes it difficult. So for us, I mean, we are increasingly asking our procuring entities to look at the context. In the past, it was very much a paint by numbers. You almost follow the guidelines. You issue this. These are the thresholds above which you'll go out internationally. Under this, you'll go nationally. Off you go. Now, the focus is much more on looking at the market, understanding what the challenges and constraints are, and what, therefore, the approach to the procurement should be. And this is a discussion that actually has come up relatively recently on some IT procurement. How to bridge that gap that I was mentioning earlier between ensuring that you have an entity with the necessary experience and track record, but that you're not shutting out those with the cutting edge experience and knowledge of the technology of today. So it's an ongoing conversation. There's no silver bullet, but we do want our procuring entities to look far more at the context.
Okay, thank you for that, Doug. Can Tremaine, would you also like to unmute and ask a question as well?
Hi, thanks, Keegan. All right, Tremaine, CEO of Binary Beam Limited, a software company from Jamaica. I noticed on your site, Douglas, where you have invited consultants to register. I'm not sure if you would have spoken on that earlier, but what would be the requirements for a consultant, whether Jamaica or Caribbean, to be a part of your registered consultants list?
Thanks for that question. I'm glad you asked it because I neglected to refer to that. So you're right. We've had a register of consultants for quite some years, and that's a very useful resource for us and for our clients, particularly when we're struggling to get a suitable shortlist together and we need to go out and find additional firms, or we're in an area where we don't really know who's in the market. The current register has been taken down. We had basically a system that had come to the end of its life. Last week, actually, our board approved financing for a new register of consultants. And that is going to be hopefully more interactive. It's going to have more opportunities for you to share information on what you do, what your specialities are, and what kind of information you want to receive from the bank as well. So at the moment, I think we're hoping to undertake the development work on that in Q1. So that's something we should be able to share some information on, and perhaps that's something through Rifbid we could, Keegan, share with the community.
Okay, yeah, definitely, we'll do. We have
Right.
one
Thanks a lot.
question in the Q&A section from Corinne. This is more of a concern about, there was a project that was advertised, I'm not too sure which country, on a consultancy for services for change management and communications since May 2023. And it is, well, now she's saying we're now in November of 2024, and there haven't been any updates in regards to that particular consultancy. And I think it was between a member company and CDB. I think she's asking me what is the best means. She wants some input on the matter, and maybe what's the best means to communicate with either a CDB representative regarding what's the delays within that particular procurement activity.
Sure. So, sorry, who was asking that question?
Corinne Lafont from, I think, communication. Yeah.
Corinne, I don't know if that's an internal requirement for the bank itself, or whether that was for one of our clients. But
Douglas, are you hearing me?
yes, yeah, I am.
Yes, Douglas, thank you so much for attempting to answer the question. It's just very concerning that a contracting authority puts out a request, you respond, it takes forever to get even a response, because this was done in May. When I submitted the proposal, it was May 2023.
Yeah.
It took about 8 months, I think, for, if I recall correctly, for them to even say something. And when they did, there's an urgency for me to respond. Yes, respond right away, you know, soonest. You respond and say, yes, you're interested after so many months. And then they go ghost on you. And then when you follow up, you're not getting anything. I make a call, you're not getting a response. They promise to call back, you get nothing. I look on the website and you suddenly see no links, 404s. It's like they just totally come off the grid. Then I attended a procurement seminar webinar the other day. Very, very informative one. I think CDB was also involved in that. And nobody's answering the question. There was a representative actually from speaking about that specific consultancy, and they were just vague and avoiding the question. So I'm like, I'm so glad you're here, Douglas. So I could actually come at you to find out why is CDB holding up the process, because they actually blame you in the email that I received. I'm putting it out there, I'm not hiding. They said they're having critical discussions with CDB, and that is what's causing the delay. So Douglas, why are you all holding up the process?
Corinne, I can assure you it's not me personally. But
Keegan is laughing. I am not hiding anything here. Everybody can just be, I'm in communication, so I'm communicating. I want to get an answer, Douglas.
I don't blame you. And as I said, remember in my past history, I was in your shoes. So I know how frustrating this can be. What we'll do, we will find out what is happening and we will come back to you. The vast majority of complaints I get are about exactly this issue. And there is let's be frank, there is a capacity, sometimes attitudinal problem with some of the executing agencies we work with. And as I said earlier, when these things are not working, we are a route that you can go to find out what is happening. So you can actually send an email, Karine, to us. We'll put the email into the chat. We'll find out what's. Can you put your email in as well? We'll find out what's. Or you can send it to me personally.
Douglas, that's what I want to hear. I don't want you to tell me send it to us. I want to talk to you.
It'll go to me. It'll go to me, and we'll find out what's happening, and we'll come back to you.
Douglas, don't make me have to call you. You know, I'm not far from Barbados. Don't make me.
No. We will get back to you. It may not be the answer you want, but we will get back to you.
No, I don't have a problem with the answer that I want. I just want an answer. You see, because what you said you had a past life as a consultant, and I'm going to tell you, it takes a lot to prepare a proposal.
I know.
Blood, sweat, and tears, because you're coming up against some serious competition that you don't even know. Look, Dylan is clapping. Thank you, my love. You understand? So I don't have time to waste. And when I go for contracts, I'm not going to lose. I am going to win that bid.
Of course.
Okay?
No, Karine, I spent 15 years in your shoes, so I completely understand.
So don't play with me, Douglas. Email me back.
I've sent you in the chat. You'll find the address. This goes for anybody else. This is the general procurement address, which comes into the team. We're monitoring this every day.
Yes, my darling. And you see, I put my thing out there publicly. So now everybody on this chat, all 32 people have my email. Feel free to reach out to me, Dylan and all the rest. Feel free.
Thank you, Karine.
This is the collaboration for the wonderful joint venture next time.
That's right. Thank you, Douglas. Thank you, Keegan.
Okay, this is good. If I'm going to get to you, I think I'm going to pose one question in the chat, then get to you. Also, Karine, we also built a tool to help with proposal writing at rifbid.com. Hopefully, maybe it's helpful to easing the pain of the burden of writing those long proposals as well. There was one question.
Keegan, I love actually doing my own proposals. I'm not the AI type of girl. I don't want to be using any particular template. I love it. Okay, but thank you so much. Share what you want to share. I'll look at it.
You're welcome. There was one question in the chat about what are the eligibility criteria for small and medium enterprises like Lucius and the others. Is there anything in place for the enterprises to get involved? So I guess I also wanted to add on to a question. I think sometimes in the US, we see that there's special allocations where procuring agents have to allocate maybe 20% of the budget to procuring from small and medium enterprises. Is there any like that within the Caribbean or the development bank that you know? Maybe not particularly the development bank, but is there any mechanisms like that?
Sort of is the long way of getting there. So on consulting services, there is at the discretion of the procuring entity, 10% of the technical score can be given to input from the experts from the country in question, and not just any inputs, it has to be key experts. So on the consulting services, we have that. On the goods and works, we can have a preference for regional suppliers and contractors up to a ceiling. That's allowed for. And if we're doing national competitive bidding and the country in question has some of those set-asides which don't conflict with our procurement framework, those can also be built into the process. So there's a number of different avenues, but this goes back to what I was saying earlier about the importance of that planning upfront assessment stage to understand what the objectives of the procuring entity and the country in question are, and how then that can be reflected in the procurement process.
Thanks. Thanks for that. I guess so. Let's get to last question. We have about 3 more minutes. Arthur, I know you've had your hand up for a little bit. Take the floor.
Hi, Arthur.
I appreciate that, Keegan, and I do see Rifbid as an asset. Thanks again to Doug and Keegan for your efforts hosting. Dr. Antoine, I currently sit in Florida, but work east to west coast, USA, as a consultant, civil engineering, project program management, and expanding globally, and really an entrepreneur by lifestyle. That said, firstly, a comment. I want to say I'm glad Corinne vented, and I feel, Doug, building on the momentum from that tripartite World Bank, CDB, OECS, procurement fair, it was a great avenue to put your implementing agencies on the spot and have these candid conversations. And I feel or advocate and implore that if we could do more of that, we would get rid of that elephant in the room and the blatant non-responsiveness we experience sometimes as MSMEs. That said, my question was when you mentioned the bringing out the new registry or repository of consultants. I've been on that in a former role with other different big and small firms. I'm trying to understand moving forward, how would that help us specifically as an MSME win work, whether it's directly with the CDBA or with your implementing agencies?
Okay. On the first point, the procurement fair that you mentioned that we did in OECS, and I remember you being an active participant in that event. Just to let you all know that we're planning a few more for next year, including one in the OECS and hopefully one in Belize and one in the Bahamas. That's all being worked through at the moment with the governments, with partners, but we'll put the word out on our website. We'll ask, I'm sure we can ask Keegan if he could promote that as and when those move forward. And perhaps we can do some more events like this as well. I mean, I think it's good to reach a diverse cross-section of different types of companies, different types of consultants. The issue about the register. So it's not mandatory to be on that register to participate in any of the processes. For the bank, where we're contracting in our own right, and we're doing our market research, we're going to look at that register, and where the country is undertaking their market research to see who's active in the space. We want to make that information available to them. But it's also useful where we or our clients are struggling to find suitable consultants, or if it's a smaller, lower value process where it's a limited bidding, or in some instances, rare instances, even a direct award, it's going to be a very useful resource. And the other thing we're going to do is what we want to try to do on there is to track actually the work that you've been doing with us. That's still something we're discussing, how and to what extent we can do that. But it would be good if we could start building up an understanding of which firms are working with us where. And maybe that's our contract awards page feeding into our register. There's a lot, as I said, the main development work is still to come on this. But we want to be able to push information out to you through that on what's actually happening in terms of opportunities, but also to get the feedback from you as to where you're working, what types of projects you're doing. So it's a little bit more current than static. And the other thing is we will be requiring relatively regular updates on your status, your sectors, etc., because the old one didn't have that requirement, and some of the information was far too old to really be relevant.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Arthur. Thanks for the question. Okay, so now we're 1 minute over. I want to be really respectful of everybody's time. I think we really had a great discussion with Doug. I want to take the time to really thank him and his team for having this discussion with us and sharing his knowledge. And I think everybody left with a little bit more knowledge about the procurement process and are in a better position to win a few more government contracts within the region. So at this point in time, looking to close off the meeting and say thank you for everybody for joining.
Thanks, Keegan and team. Thanks, everybody.